The loudest thing in my life right now is the silence. It's a clean, simple silence, punctuated by the hum of an old refrigerator and the distant rumble of the early morning bus. It's the kind of quiet you can think in. It's a stark contrast to the noise that consumed me for 2 years, the frantic, digital, 24/7 noise of a life I chased until it drove me off a cliff. It was the noise of 1,000 YouTube videos promising a golden future, the noise of online forums buzzing with hype and greed, the constant, addictive chime of a portfolio app on my phone, and the frantic, desperate beating of my own heart as I chased a ghost called fast money. Before I met that ghost, my life was a testament to slow money. I was a graphic designer at a respectable, if unexciting, marketing firm. I was good at my job. I had a steady income, a loving wife, and a small, neat house in a quiet suburb. Our life was a spreadsheet that my wife managed with a beautiful, sensible precision. We had a budget. We had a 5-year plan. We were diligently saving for a down payment on a bigger house, the kind with a real backyard for the kids we planned to have. We were building a life the old-fashioned way, brick by boring brick, and I was happy. Or at least I thought I was. But a seed of impatience had been planted in me, probably by the world itself. I saw stories online, articles, and videos of people my age, people with no special skills, becoming millionaires overnight. They weren't building with bricks, they were riding rockets, and the fuel for those rockets had a name: cryptocurrency. It started innocently enough. I took a few $100s, money we had set aside for a weekend trip, and I bought some Bitcoin. I didn't even really tell my wife. It was just a little experiment, a lottery ticket. But then a strange thing happened. The lottery tickets started winning. I'd check the app on my phone, and the number would be bigger every day. A few $100s became 1,000. 1,000 became 2,000. The feeling was a shot of pure dopamine, a chemical thrill that my steady paycheck could never provide. It felt like I had discovered a secret cheat code for life. I started to believe I was a genius, a financial visionary who had seen the future when everyone else was stuck in the past. The conversation at our dinner table began to change. I was no longer talking about my day at the office. I was talking about blockchain technology, about market caps, about the revolutionary potential of decentralized finance. My wife, my sensible, cautious partner, was skeptical at first. "It feels like gambling," she'd say, her brow furrowed with concern. But my enthusiasm and the undeniable green numbers on my phone screen was infectious. She started to get swept up in the dream with me. We weren't just saving for a down payment anymore. We were planning our early retirement. The dream of a house with a backyard was replaced by a dream of a life with no jobs, no bosses, a life of endless travel and true freedom, all paid for by this magical internet money. My investment grew. I sold the boring, sensible stocks I had been accumulating for years, the ones that grew at a snail's pace, and I fed the hungry crypto machine. I moved beyond Bitcoin and into the wild west of altcoins, obscure digital tokens that promised not just a doubling of my money, but a 100x return. I was no longer an investor. I was a prospector, a gambler in a digital casino that never closed. My life became a series of charts and graphs. I was obsessed. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. to check the Asian markets, my face illuminated by the eerie green glow of the screen. My work at the design firm suffered. I was physically present, but my mind was a million miles away, tracking the price of a coin named after a dog or some obscure Greek god. I was part of an online community, a global army of believers who reinforced my delusion. In our echo chamber, any doubt was dismissed as FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. We were the chosen ones, the diamond-handed heroes who would hodl our way to generational wealth. The numbers on my phone screen were astronomical. We were on paper rich. We had more money in our crypto portfolio than my father had earned in his entire lifetime of backbreaking work. But it wasn't real. It was a flickering digital promise. And to make it bigger, to accelerate our journey to the promised land, I made the single most catastrophic decision of my life. I convinced my wife that we should take out a home equity line of credit. We would leverage our small, safe, real-world asset to get more ammunition for the digital casino. "It's a sure thing," I told her, my eyes shining with the fever of a true believer. "The market is in a supercycle. We'll pay the loan back in a month." She was scared. I could see it. But she trusted me. I was the visionary, the genius who had led us this far, so she agreed. I transferred a sum of money that represented a decade of our slow, steady work into a crypto exchange and bought a new, highly speculative altcoin that promised to revolutionize the gaming industry. I had done no real research. I had just read a few hyped-up posts online. I wasn't investing, I was praying. For a single glorious week, I was a prophet. The coin exploded. Our portfolio reached a number so large it seemed like a typo. I walked around in a daze of arrogance and disbelief. I told my wife to start looking at real estate in Portugal. I started drafting my resignation letter in my head. I had done it. I had beaten the system. I was a king, the ruler of a kingdom made of nothing but hype and hope. I had no idea that my kingdom was about to be wiped off the face of the earth. The thing about a rocket ship is that it burns a tremendous amount of fuel on the way up, and when it runs out, it doesn't just gently float back to Earth. It falls like a stone. My rocket ship ran out of fuel on a Tuesday. It started not with a bang, but with a tremor. The market, which had only known one direction, up, suddenly dipped. A sharp, violent plunge that erased a month of gains in a few hours. The online forums, my trusted echo chamber, were a cacophony of panic and bravado. "Buy the dip," the true believers screamed. "This is the shakeout before the next leg up, diamond hands." And I, a devout member of the cult, listened. I didn't sell, I bought more. I took the last of our cash reserves and threw it onto the fire. Then I took out a high-interest personal loan. I was no longer just investing our savings and our home equity. I was investing our future, our ability to simply survive. I was a gambler doubling down on a losing hand, convinced I could bluff the entire market. But the market wasn't bluffing. The dip wasn't a dip. It was the beginning of an avalanche. The news started to trickle in, then it became a flood. A major crypto lender froze withdrawals. A stablecoin, the supposedly safe bedrock of the ecosystem, lost its peg and collapsed to zero. The project I had bet our house on, the one that was going to revolutionize the gaming industry, was exposed as an elaborate scam, the founders vanishing with billions of dollars of investors' money. The market didn't just crash, it evaporated. I watched it happen in real time, a prisoner in my own home, glued to the screen of my laptop. It was a digital bloodbath. The green numbers that had been the source of all my joy and arrogance turned a deep, brutal red. I watched as our paper fortune, our dream of a life of freedom, was systematically erased. A year's worth of gains vanished in an hour. Our entire life savings were gone by lunchtime. By dinner, the value of my portfolio was less than the loans I had taken out. I was no longer just broke. I was in a hole, a crater of debt so deep I couldn't see the top. The silence in our house that night was a living thing. It was thick and suffocating. My wife sat at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills, her face a pale, emotionless mask. The shared dream that had united us, that had made us a team, had become a shared nightmare. And in that nightmare, we were no longer a team. We were two trapped, terrified individuals, and she was looking at the man who had locked the doors and set the building on fire. The arguments started the next day. They were raw and ugly, fueled by a terror I had never seen in her before. All the doubts she had suppressed, all the sensible warnings she had ignored because she trusted me, came pouring out. "You ruined us," she screamed, her voice hoarse with a pain that was all my fault. "You and your stupid internet money, you gambled our lives away." I had no defense. She was right. I was a gambler, an addict who had mistaken a winning streak for genius. The calls from the banks started, the friendly loan officers replaced by grim, persistent collections agents. The passive income I had dreamed of had become an active, aggressive, and relentless campaign of harassment demanding money I did not have. Our life became a prison of debt. Every ring of the phone, every official-looking envelope in the mail was a new source of dread. We stopped sleeping. We stopped talking. We just coexisted in a state of constant, low-grade terror, the ghost of our lost fortune haunting every room of our small, mortgaged house. I tried to fix it. I took on freelance design work, working late into the night, trying to earn my way out of the crater I had dug. But the debt was too large, the interest rates too high. For every dollar I earned, we owed two more. It was like trying to bail out the ocean with a teaspoon. The breaking point was quiet and final. I came home one evening, exhausted from my day job and a night of freelance work, to find two suitcases by the front door. She was in the kitchen making a simple dinner for our son who wasn't born yet but whose future I had already gambled away. No, wait. We didn't have kids. The story was about planning to have kids. Let me correct that. I came home to find suitcases by the door. She was in the kitchen, her back to me. "I'm going to my mother's," she said, her voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't live with the constant fear, the constant reminder of what you threw away. I need to be somewhere I can breathe." I begged her to stay. I pleaded. I made 1,000 desperate promises I had no way of keeping. I promised I would fix it, that I would work every hour of every day. But my promises were worthless. I was a liar, a man who had sold his wife a dream and delivered a nightmare. I loved the man I married, she said, finally turning to face me, her eyes filled not with anger but with a profound, soul-crushing disappointment. He was careful. He was kind. He was building a real life. I don't know who you are. You're a stranger who is addicted to a screen, a ghost who destroyed everything we had. She left that night. I stood by the window and watched the taillights of her car disappear down our quiet, suburban street. The street where we were supposed to build a life. The street where I was supposed to build her a fortress of security and had instead erected a monument to my own greed and stupidity. I was alone in a house that was no longer really mine, with a mountain of debt, a worthless portfolio of digital dust, and the crushing, absolute silence of a life I had single-handedly destroyed. The ghost of fast money had promised me a kingdom. It had delivered a wasteland. The wasteland is a quiet place. After my wife left, the frantic noise of my crypto obsession was replaced by the deafening silence of my failure. The house, which had once been a symbol of our slow and steady progress, became a prison of memories. Every room held a ghost of a future that would never happen. I walked through the halls like a specter, my own life a haunted house. The debt was a relentless hunter. Without my wife's income, and with my own diminished by the distraction and the stress, I couldn't keep up with the payments. The foreclosure notices began to arrive, each one a formal, legal confirmation of my ruin. I had leveraged our home for a digital dream, and now the real world was coming to collect. I had to sell the house in a short sale, a final, humiliating act of surrender. I walked away with nothing, not a single dollar of the equity we had so painstakingly built. I was 40 years old, and I was starting over from less than zero. I moved into a single room in a shared house on the other side of town. My roommates were a collection of students and transient workers, kids in their early 20s who saw my quiet, haunted presence as a curiosity. I owned a bed, a suitcase of clothes, and a laptop that I was still paying off on a credit card. My world had shrunk to the size of that small, anonymous room. The shame was a physical thing, a constant, heavy cloak that I couldn't take off. I avoided contact with my old friends, my family. How could I explain what I had done? How could I articulate the sheer, breathtaking stupidity of my choices? It was easier to just disappear, to become a ghost. I found a job. It wasn't in graphic design. I couldn't face that world, a world of creativity and optimism that felt like a cruel joke. I took a job in a warehouse packing boxes. The work was monotonous, repetitive, and physically demanding. It was perfect. For 10 hours a day, I didn't have to think. I just had to lift, pack, and seal. My mind, which had been a torment of what-ifs and if-onlys, was finally quiet. The physical exhaustion was a mercy. It left no room for the mental anguish. My life became a simple, Spartan routine. Work, eat, sleep. I was a monk in a monastery of cardboard and packing tape. My only goal was survival, to earn enough to pay my rent and to start chipping away at the mountain of debt I had created. It was a humbling, grinding existence, and it was exactly what I needed. I had to detoxify myself from the drug of fast money. I deleted the portfolio apps from my phone. I unsubscribed from the YouTube channels. I left the online forums. I had to cut myself off from the world that had poisoned me. It was a real withdrawal. For weeks, I felt a constant, twitchy anxiety, a phantom limb-like urge to check the charts, to see if the market had miraculously recovered and restored my fortune. But slowly, gradually, the urge began to fade. The noise in my head was replaced by the simple, tangible reality of my new life. The satisfaction I got from a perfectly packed box, from a full day of honest work, was a quiet, solid feeling. It wasn't the giddy, unstable thrill of a 10x gain, but it was real. I started to notice the world again, the one outside of the charts. I started to appreciate small things, the taste of a hot coffee after a long shift, the feeling of the sun on my face during my walk to the bus stop, the simple pleasure of reading a book from the library. My old life had been lived in a frantic, digital future. I was learning to live in the slow, analog present. I started to deal with my debt. I called the banks and the credit card companies. I didn't make excuses. I just told them the truth. I was broke, but I wanted to pay back what I owed. I worked out a payment plan, a punishingly long road that would likely take me a decade or more to complete. But it was a road. It was a path forward. The act of taking responsibility, of confronting the mess I had made, was a crucial step. It was the first time in a long time that I felt a flicker of my old self, the responsible man, the man who paid his bills. One day, after about a year of this new life, I received a letter from my wife. It wasn't a letter of anger or blame. It was a letter of sadness. She told me she had filed for divorce. She told me she was doing well, that she had a new job, a new life. She said she hoped I was okay. There was a finality to it that was both heartbreaking and liberating. The dream of reconciliation, a dream I hadn't even let myself fully acknowledge, was over. The old life was well and truly dead, and that meant I was finally free to build a new one. The divorce papers were the final closing of a door, and with it came a strange, unexpected peace. The fight to reclaim my old life was over because there was nothing left to reclaim. The only way forward was to accept the wasteland and start planting new seeds. My life continued on its simple, quiet trajectory. I worked in the warehouse. I paid my bills. I lived within my meager means. The mountain of debt was still there, but it no longer felt like a life sentence. It was just a part of my story, a financial scar that I was learning to live with. I started to reconnect with the person I had been before the crypto fever took hold. I started drawing again, filling sketchbooks with designs and ideas not for a client but for myself. The act of creating, of bringing something new into the world, was a powerful antidote to the destruction I had caused. It was a quiet act of defiance against my own failure. I began to forgive myself. It was the hardest work of all. I had to forgive the greed, the arrogance, the willful blindness. I had to accept that I had been a fool, but that my foolishness did not have to be the defining chapter of my life. My story was still being written. I reconnected with my family, my parents, and my siblings. I told them the whole ugly truth. There was no judgment in their eyes, only a deep, sad love. They had been worried about me, about the frantic, obsessed stranger I had become. They were just happy to have their son, their brother, back. Their acceptance was a powerful gift. I learned that real wealth, the kind that can't be lost in a market crash, is the love of the people who know you at your worst and still stand by you. After a few years, I left the warehouse. I took a job at a small, local printing press, a position that allowed me to use my design skills again. The pay was modest, but the work was satisfying. I was making things again, tangible things, posters, brochures, books. I found a deep pleasure in the smell of ink and paper, in the rhythmic clatter of the printing machines. It was a slow, craft-based world, the complete opposite of the instantaneous, ethereal world of cryptocurrency. It was a world that made sense to me again. I still live in a small, rented room. I still take the bus to work. I am, by any conventional measure, a man of very little means, but I am not a poor man. I have a peace of mind that is more valuable than any Bitcoin. I have rediscovered the joy of a simple, honest day's work. I have learned that the greatest passive income is the quiet satisfaction that comes from living a life of integrity. I don't know what my future holds. I may never own a house again. I may always be in the process of paying for the mistakes of my past. But I am not afraid anymore. The ghost of fast money no longer haunts me. I learned in the most brutal way possible that the shortcuts in life usually lead you right off a cliff. The long way, the slow way, the boring way of building something brick by brick, that's the only path that leads to a place of real, enduring value. I lost everything chasing a digital dream. But in the silence of the aftermath, I found something real. I found myself. Thanks for listening to my story. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments and tell me which country you're from. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this.